Are we, and especially our data, truly safe on the internet? This is the question we will approach. Today we show you why and how, to this day, in Germany, users' personal and sensitive data is still far from being protected, even though we as users might feel safe. First, we show you why our topic is so relevant with a short video, and then introduce you to the past research on predicting private data online. After that, we present our own study and analysis approach, and will then describe what we found and what it means in more depth.
Big data has become increasingly important in recent years, as a vast amount and variety of data enables detailed insights for companies. However, big data often compromises the privacy of those individuals whose data is being gathered and analyzed, many of them being unaware of the process. In combination with big data and data analytics, social media is increasingly mentioned as a threat to data privacy. While many users only seem to see the benefits of connecting with friends and sharing content, they ignore the fact that the platform built their business models around this data. The biggest data scandal in social media history so far that illustrated just how social media can be misappropriated is the case of Cambridge Analytica. The British data company allegedly claimed to have influenced the 2016 US elections by identifying and targeting so-called swing voters. The bitter aftertaste? They did so using numerous Facebook accounts containing personal data and psychometric test results to feed their algorithm. Following these recent developments threatening personal data privacy, the European Union has enacted a regulation that protects this data and regulates the gathering, storing and processing of sensitive data by companies. Because of this law, that is considered to be the toughest privacy and security law in the world, many people have argued that a scenario similar to the Cambridge Analytica scandal would not be possible in the European Union. But how would you react if we told you that the data publicly available on social media about you can be used in the exact same way to infer knowledge about very personal data you never intended to share? Crazy, right? Let's get a bit further into it with an example. This is Lenka. As most young people in Germany, she uses social media, especially Instagram. She likes to upload pictures and stories. Additionally, from her bio we know that she lives in Münster. On Instagram, she follows a lot of interesting people and brands, and of course all her friends. From the information Lenka shares on her profile, she should not be too concerned about her privacy, right? As we can see, she only uploads pictures and states where she lives. Who knows if her name is even Lenka? We know more. From her Instagram subscriptions, we can predict personal data such as her demographics, personality, level of education and health. For example, subscribing to the news page Tagesschau shows us that Lenka is most likely a female of low age and low income. We assume you are just as shocked as we are. How did we know all this? Let's dive deeper into what we actually did.
Before we start talking about our own study, we will first look at past literature on the topic. In previous studies, various social media data are used to predict users' personal data. On Facebook, likes, messages, the status and pictures are examined. Other studies also investigate Instagram data, such as the pictures and filters. Predictions have also been made based on various Twitter and website data. The clear focus of the studies to date has therefore been on Facebook. Instagram subscriptions have not yet been studied in past research, even though Instagram is a particularly important channel that is constantly growing. When focusing on what was previously predicted, we see that studies often focus on the personality. Also frequently predicted are age and gender, followed by health and intelligence. Other studies predict the sexual or political orientation or satisfaction with life of social media users, but also income, ethnicity, religion, relationship status, and number of children. Overall, most studies are set in the US and UK. The 2013 study by Kosinski et al. Is one of the most well-known studies that predicts most of the personal data previously mentioned. Our literature analysis leads us now to the research gap we want to address. We discover 3 research gaps. First, there's no study yet that focuses on Instagram subscriptions. Second, only the study by Kosinski et al. Thus far extensively predicts multiple personal and sensitive information, and no study yet attempts to predict the values of people. Third, there's only one big study to date set in Germany which predicts the political orientation of users with the help of Facebook likes. Other personal data as well as Instagram were no focus of German studies. Thus, we want to predict a wide variety of personal and sensitive data for German users with the help of their Instagram subscriptions. But how can we integrate all this into one study? Using a large-scale web survey, we collect the data of participants and their subscriptions. We ask for the subscriptions to 229 pre-selected accounts from 10 different categories. Like Kosinski et al., we ask for age, gender, and relationship status. To approach ethnicity in Germany, we use the migration background and ask for the education level as an approximation for intelligence. Going further than Kosinski, we also examine employment status, income, children, and residence within East or West Germany. Like most studies in this field, we also try to predict the personality of Instagram users. For this, we use the Big 5 personality traits, which were used frequently in past studies. Also, like Kosinski et al., we examine sexual, political, and religious orientation. For new insights, we integrate the green values of consumers as well as the attitudes towards COVID-19 to account for current developments. We further ask participants about their consumption regarding alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. Wow, that's a lot of personal data, right? But who participated and how did we find them? We gathered the data through private channels, an online research community, as well as a panel. This approach allows us to cover a wide range of German participants from different demographic and social groups. After cleaning our data, we are left with 1,863 participants for the final analysis. Of those, we can see that we mirror the German Instagram population quite well. 62% are female, and the respondents are rather young, with 32 being the average age. 65% are in a relationship, around 30% have children, and 17% of our participants have a migration background. Fitting with the low age, many of our respondents earn little to no money. To evaluate and analyze the data, we planted a lot of trees. That might sound funny, but you will soon understand why. Before analyzing the data, we had to consider several things. First, there might be complex interactions between the 229 accounts serving as our IVs. Also, our DVs consists of different data types, namely numerical, categorical, and binary data. Last, there might be highly correlated IVs from accounts expressing similar views, like AfD and Alice Weidel. So, we need to find a method that accounts for multiple interaction effects, differently scaled DVs, and multicollinearity. The solution we found, which best fits our data, is the random forest algorithm. This supervised machine learning algorithm makes predictions based on a large number of decision trees. In other words, instead of building just one decision tree, as you see here on the left, the random forest algorithm builds hundreds of these single trees but introduces randomness through picking random training points when building the trees and by not allowing each variable to be considered per step, but rather a random sample of predictors only. Finally, the trees are averaged to make predictions. We build an individual model for all variables. In each analysis, we split our dataset into a training and a holdout sample. We then train our models with the training sample. We account for data imbalance via resampling with the SMOTE method and tune several hyperparameters by performing grid search together with cross-validation. Also, we optimize each model according to the performance metric that suits the data type. Lastly, we assess the model performance with the help of the holdout sample by looking at the area under the receiver operator characteristic curve for binary and categorical variables and the Pearson correlation coefficient for numeric variables. After choosing the best performing model for each unique DV, the random forest model further allows us to identify those variables most important for the prediction. Now hopefully you are all eager to see our results. For each model we achieve different levels of prediction accuracy. We will first talk about the variables that were coded binary or categorical. Here, a good discrimination is an AUC level of 0.7 or higher. For demographics and personal attributes, we are able to predict gender, with the highest accuracy in total of 92%, meaning that in 92% of the cases, our model correctly discriminates between males and females, closely followed by an 86% accuracy of correctly differentiating between Islam and Christianity. We achieve similar results for the education level. Whether a user has children or is employed can be predicted with an accuracy close to 80%. Further, our model correctly discriminates between a user who has an income above or below average in 73% of the cases, and whether a user has a migration background or not in 72% of the cases. Unfortunately, our models do not predict sexual orientation, relationship status, and whether a user lives in East or West Germany at acceptable AUC levels. Looking at personal values and behavior, we first see that we can predict the voting behavior for some parties better than for others. We accurately identify AfD voters 86% of the time and Die Grünen voters with an accuracy of 81%. For Die Linke voters, our model is correct in 77% of cases. A more moderate prediction accuracy is achieved when identifying non-voters with 74% and 70% for predicting whether a user votes for the FDP or not. However, no precise predictions could be made for users voting for the CDU or the SPD. Last, we are able to infer drug usage with a prediction accuracy of 75%. Other consumption behaviors could only be predicted with an accuracy below 70. To judge the performance of the models for numeric variables, we turn to the Pearson product moment correlation coefficient. Here, our threshold for good predictions is a correlation of 30% or higher between the predictions and the actual values. The by far highest correlation coefficient can be observed for the age variable with 67%, followed by people indicating stronger skepticism regarding COVID-19 with 37%. We can further predict COVID-19 deniers and people who want less strict COVID-19 regulations with a correlation coefficient of 35%. Unfortunately, for the people wanting stricter COVID-19 regulations, as well as for the green consumer values and all personality traits, we are not able to find high correlations. From the resulting random forests, we can see which accounts are most influential for each variable to correctly predict personal data. Due to the important role of interactions between multiple accounts in the random forests, we are able to make predictions with more security the more predictive accounts a user follows. We want to show you which accounts are most important for discriminating the variables gender, Islam versus Christianity, and voting for the AfD, as those were the three variables we can predict best. For example, DM and Tagesschau are highly predictive for female users, while the Instagram pages of FIFA and Mercedes are more predictive for male users. Furthermore, while McDonald's and Aldi Süd are good predictors for Christians, followers of Mero and Islamfakten will more likely be Muslims. We further found accounts that help identify AfD voters. In addition to being a follower of the party's page, following Xbox increases the chance of a user voting for the AfD. This is contrasted by subscribing to Tagesschau and the satirical program Heute Show. As you can see, we find many different interesting results. Let's now work on explaining them. We were able to predict nearly all demographics except for the residents within East OS Germany and the relationship status. As a potential explanation for this, we argue that younger people who use Instagram most frequently are not strongly affected anymore by the differences between East and West in Germany, and that the relationship categorization of single versus taken is too generalized. Concerning values and orientation, we find that we can explain more extreme positions and attitudes better. We are able to predict a part of the political parties, the religious orientation, and extremes of COVID-19 positions. Only a mediocre accuracy can be achieved for both CDU and SPD voters, as these parties do not represent extreme values. Furthermore, it was not possible to determine the sexual orientation despite targeted account selection. In the health area, we were only partially successful. Here, we are only able to accurately predict the consumption of drugs, but not of alcohol and cigarettes. This again might be because drug consumption is more extreme and illegal in Germany than the other two, and therefore might be represented in the Instagram usage more. Lastly, we were not able to predict the Big Five with a high accuracy. We assume that this is primarily because Instagram accounts, and particularly the ones we examine, cannot adequately express personality, especially considering that the Big Five themselves are regarded critically by researchers nowadays. Now, how do these results compare to what Kosinski et al. Found for Facebook in 2013? For binary and categorical variables, we often observe similar results to Kosinski et al. We are better at predicting drug usage, but worse at predicting the ethnicity, cigarette consumption, sexual orientation, and relationship status. However, note that we did not measure ethnicity but migration background, and not being lesbian or gay but the sexual orientation, so the comparisons themselves here are difficult. For numeric variables, the comparison is somewhat sobering since we underperform Kosinski et al. On all variables. This is especially true for the personality measures. Nevertheless, it is remarkable that we are still able to find comparable results to Kosinski et al. In many of the other measured attributes and constructs. So why did we find different results compared to Kosinski et al.? On the one hand, we follow a different research approach. Our sample size is much smaller and we collect the data via a survey rather than taking it directly from the platform. Also, the setting of our collection in Germany and on Instagram is different than the setting in the US and on Facebook. When it comes to the statistical approach, we used the random forest algorithm, while Kosinski et al. Used several linear and logistic regressions. Further, we decided to include categorical DVs rather than coding all variables binary. On the other hand, the fact that the two studies are set in different circumstances is important. This means that the behaviors on social media, as well as attitudes towards privacy online, can be expected to differ, with Germans being more cautious and less willing to share much online than Americans. Also, the way of living in the two countries differ, with different values and lifestyles being prevalent and expressed. Moreover, the legal rules between Germany and the United States differ. This, on the one hand, might affect how safe users feel to share private information online, but also means that other laws apply. For example, this might explain why we can predict drug usage but not alcohol or cigarette consumption like Kosinski et al. Could, as the alcohol and cigarette consumption in Germany is more socially acceptable and less extreme than in the US. But how can third parties use these results? And should we be afraid for our privacy? There are two sides to our findings. For certain groups, applying our findings can be very beneficial. Marketeers could make use of the Instagram subscriptions of potential and actual customers for more precise profiling and targeting. HR managers could similarly use the Instagram subscriptions to assess employees and make predictions about their performance. Also, politicians could better identify and target current or potential voters, similar to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Lastly, service providers such as loan givers or insurance companies could use the predictions to better evaluate not only their current customers but also people applying for their services. On the other side, our findings are concerning. First, we show that whenever users are active on social media, their privacy is threatened. We show that data protection laws today in Germany are still not covering all relevant personal data sources. This basically means that users are given a false sense of security online. Even worse than users not knowing about what is done with their information, this can also lead to them suffering from wrong predictions made based on their behavior on social media. Let's illustrate why this is so concerning with an example. You might remember Lenka and her Instagram page. Now you should be able to understand why we claim to know so much about Lenka. But let's take a closer look. Because Lenka follows Tagesschau, we would predict that she has a low income. Loan providers could use this information to infer that she might not be able to pay back a loan and therefore not grant it to her. Furthermore, Lenka follows Allman memes for entertainment. However, if insurance companies knew that people following Allman memes are more likely to take drugs, they might raise the fees for her insurance, all without Lenka knowing which assumptions are made about her and without her having a chance to defend herself. And let's not forget that these are only predictions, not facts. For quite some of the shown predictions, we achieved only low accuracies. Many users could therefore be wrongly classified into unfavorable groups and suffer from disadvantages. Our findings further raise questions and uncover future challenges. First, we have to ask ourselves how much protection of privacy is necessary and wanted by the users. That is, because users seem to not know or care about their data being misused, where should the line be drawn in protecting their data? Following this, we also have to ask ourselves how current awareness gaps for data privacy can be addressed. And who is responsible for protecting users' personal and sensitive data better? Is it companies who can make sure that any data is protected, the rule of law who might need to provide stricter guidelines, or is it the users themselves who need to act? Our findings are only a first glance. They uncover what is still possible today and could easily be extended, potentially violating users' privacy even further. For example, by increasing the sample size in future studies, more insights could be gained and the prediction accuracy for selected variables, such as the personality, might get better with more data. Second, instead of the survey, where the accounts and variables are predefined, more insights could be gained via crawling or other means of collecting data. Also, Instagram might not be the only channel where predictions are possible. In the future, platforms like YouTube or TikTok could similarly be in the focus of an extensive study like ours. Lastly, our statistical approach could either be changed, for example, to a regression, or refined by using additional independent or dependent variables, or by changing the tuning parameters. So, in the future, it is likely that more insights on predicting personal information can be gained, which stresses our message further that users' privacy online is far from being protected. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you are not afraid yet, follow us on Instagram. Let's see what we can predict from it.